takes the other one, scoops it under his body. Both hand grenades explode. As a result of what he did, he received the Congressional Medal of Honor. It's the highest military award. He is the youngest recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor. But he was all in. And you know what I think about? I think about those Marines that lived through the explosion. I think that they lived through the war. I think about that day when they looked at their own uniform and the blood on their uniform wasn't their blood. The blood belonged to Jack. If they lived through the war, I wonder what they think every time they hear the word Jack, every time they hear the word Lucas. Maybe every time they watch the military channel and they see a documentary, what do they see when they watch the Marines storm the beach? They have to think about that day. And so maybe you say, well, Bill, what does that have to do with football? It has a lot to do with being all in. And football is about being all in. You know what my coach told me in high school? He said, boys don't play football. Men do. He never called us boys. He said, you got to be a football man. But it was about being a team. And so today we live in a society where it's all about me. It's all about hot dogging. It's all about what I'm going to do. Try to do what you're going to do without the other guys playing. Get involved in the play and let the other guys just step off and let you do your thing. I wonder how that works out. How many of you are excited about the season coming up? The Bible lets us know that Jesus was a team player. Matter of fact, the Bible says there was nobody who ever spoke like this man. When it came to changing the lives of men and women, it says that they never seen anybody do what he did. When it came to talking about the things of God, they said nobody ever spoke like him because he doesn't speak like religious people. He speaks with power and authority. He was awesome. He raised people from the dead. He opened blinded eyes. He walked on water. And yet still he didn't make it about himself. He was all about his team. He talked about 2,000 years ago what Jack demonstrated on Iwo Jima, where he says, greater love has no man than this, that he would lay down his life for his friends. But Jesus, you got your Colts and you got your Ravens. Jesus had a team too. His team was called the disciples. He sat down with his team one day and he says, greater love has no man than this, that he would lay down his life for his friends. I call you my friends. You do what I ask you to do. He was building a team. One of the things that Jesus said all the time, follow me. Come hang out with me. In the Bible, Philippians 2:5, here's what it says. Let Jesus Christ be your example. God in his word says this. You want to see how to live? Let Jesus Christ be your example as to what your attitude should be. Because some of us have an attitude. Some of our attitudes are good. Sometimes our attitudes are bad. And Jesus always had a good attitude. Jesus always had the right attitude. And he was building this team to follow him. He was a player coach. He never asked them to do anything he wasn't willing to do himself. When people wanted to give him all kinds of props, he would just say, hey, don't tell nobody what I was doing. Chill with that. And he hangs out. And on the night what would be the equivalent of the Super Bowl in spiritual terms. He's with his team. The Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. Be real with me. How many of you, just by the raising of your hands, have ever been given a pep talk by the coach? How many of you heard that pep talk and you were fired up and you were ready to go out and play some ball? How many of you, the game did not turn out like you thought it was going to turn out? What's your neighbor say, neighbor? Talk comes real cheap in the locker room. And so you think about this. Here's Jesus. Here's Jesus. He's with his crew. And they're all focused in on themselves. Hey, can I sit at your right hand, your left hand? Oh, I'm going to be number one in the kingdom. And then he looks around the room. He knows that all these guys are going to fail him. He knows that when they're needed the most, they're going to run out on him. And one guy whose name is Peter, I love this. Jesus says to Peter, and he says this to you, whether you understand it, believe it or not. Simon, Simon, Satan desires to have you to sift you as wheat. Peter, the devil wants to take you out. Young people, coaches, Bill Page, know this. There's an entity in this world that wants to take us out. But Jesus said, but I prayed for you. And what does he pray? I pray that your faith doesn't fail. I pray that you will stay focused on me. And then he says, Peter, and when you're converted, strengthen the brother. That word converted needs to be turned around. In other words, he said, Peter's walking with Jesus now. He's letting him know something's going to happen. He's going to walk in the wrong direction. But when you get turned around, and you begin to walk in the right direction, I want you to help somebody. How many of us have ever walked in the wrong direction? How many of us have ever made up our mind, I ain't never doing that again, only to do that again? How many of us have ever prayed this prayer? Lord, I know I told you I wouldn't do that again, but I did it again. Please forgive me again. I'll never do it again, only to do it again. Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, how does this man know so much about you? Because this is the way life goes. So here's what he said. Simon desires to have you sent to his week, but I pray for you that your faith doesn't fail. When you're converted, strengthen the brother. Here's what Peter says. Lord, I'm ready to die. I'm ready to go to prison for you. He's talking smack in the locker room. Thought he was more than he was. And Jesus keeps it real all the time. Pete, before the night is out, before the rooster crows, you'll deny 3 times that you even know me. And then they leave. And they go out into a garden to pray. And then here comes this posse. Now, I'll speed this up right here. Here comes the posse to place Jesus under arrest. I love it. Because Jesus had juice. The posse comes. Jesus is so everyday looking, they don't even know who he is. He ain't walking around with a halo over his head, that lamb draped around his neck. He steps to the posse and he said, who are you looking for? They said, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. He said, I am him. The word God identifies himself in the Old Testament by saying, tell him I am is here. I am is. I am him. Boom! The whole posse falls to the ground. Dead. And then the disciples said, should we use our swords now? Jesus allows them to get up. Peter don't wait for the answer. Peter pulls his blade. He had blade skills. He swings it at this guy's head, like almost like the Matrix. But the guy wasn't quite thick, and he cuts his ear off. I think about this, being a police officer. Jesus, here's Jesus' answer to gangbanging. Jesus' answer to gangbanging. If you want to live by the sword, you will die by the sword. He says, that's enough. And then he heals this guy's ear. Can you imagine? I think about this. If I ever went to lock somebody up, and one of his boys shot my ear off, and then the guy who I went to lock up put my ear back on my head, look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, oh, it's time to take the rest of the night off. Jesus said, nobody takes my life. I lay it down. My father got 12 legions of angels, and I think about this. At least 72,000 angels standing at the realms of glory, just waiting for the boss to give him the word. There's a story in the Bible where the angel of the Lord killed 185,000 men by himself. 185,000 times 72,000, you got a whole lot of butt kicking going on. Jesus only had to snap his fingers, and that snap never came. And everybody ran away. Peter follows from a distance. One guy ran out of his clothes. That brother was booking. And then Peter gets in front. Aren't you one of his disciples? I don't know that guy. A little bit later on. Hey man, we saw you in the garden. You're one of his disciples. I don't know that man. A little bit later on, this young girl sees him. Because Peter was always running his mouth. You talk like a Galilean. You are one of his disciples. You know what he said? The Bible says that he denied the Lord with cursing. In the original translation, here's what he says. May I be damned by God if I know that man. Or may God damn me if I know him. No sooner did he say that off in the distance. And the Bible says, and Jesus looked at him. I wonder what the look looked like. Here's what it didn't look like. You know what I think the look looked like? See you in 3 days. And then he allowed them to abuse him. He allowed them to kill him, to bury him. And on the 3rd day, he rose from the dead. And he came back looking for his team that had run out on him. He demonstrated the greatest love that anyone could ever demonstrate by laying his love down. He wants you on his team. He's gone out of his way to prove it. The incredible thing about Jack Lucas, he lived through those explosions. He just died 4 years ago. Jesus lived after he raised from the dead. Jack Lucas got the Congressional Medal of Honor. Jesus didn't get that.